Peter, thank you so much for doing this. Did you stay up for that one? It was a late one.
It lasted 2 periods, and I kind of crashed in the intermission of the second. I mean, it wasn't the most exciting game I've ever seen, and it certainly wasn't the most exciting of the three we've watched on the West Coast swing so far. I'm actually going to be at the game tomorrow night in Vancouver. I'm flying out there later today to be a part of the Invictus Games opening tomorrow in Vancouver, and then going straight from that over to watch the hockey game. So it should be I'm looking forward to that trip. Maybe the Leafs were just saving a little bit of energy for Vancouver.
We will see. They're trying to have a perfect road trip, which will be tough to do there in Vancouver. But, Peter, we had you on before in years past where team was a little bit different. You're watching. Do you notice this group looking a little different? Do you have more faith in them than maybe you have in the past? Or what do you see in this season?
I've certainly got a lot more third period faith in the team. And there's no, I don't know what their record is. And, going into the third leading, I think it's almost perfect. And I can feel that. I don't get all worked up like I used to not that long ago when blowing leads in the third period was sort of a part of the Leafs motto, it seemed. But now I feel a lot more comfortable. It helps with the defensive style that Berube has brought in, but it also helps when you got two goalies who are amazing. Stolarz last night, what I saw was really top notch. Didn't look like he missed anything over the last couple of months. I think it was smart to play him last night. He was ready health wise, and so give him a game, especially a game that you figure you should be able to win without too much of a problem. But he looked good when he needed to look good. I was impressed.
You're dialed in on that number, by the way. They're 23-0-0 when leading after two, which is, again, a far cry from the Keefe administration, much different under Berube. But you're right on the goaltending front. I think it just generates excitement, whether it's Woll in there, whether it's Stoley. I can't believe this guy was hiding behind Sergei Bobrovsky in Florida all those years.
I find it stunning that nobody else went after him. I mean, if this is what he's like as a goalie year-round and heading into the playoffs, the Leafs got him for a steal. It's like the McMahon contract. How they managed to pull those two off, because I'm sure other teams around the league would have paid a lot more for either one of those guys.
Had they known, right? It's so nice and refreshing when a player comes into Toronto and flourishes and plays above their contract. Because I have always found that, a player will have a career year and they'll bring him to Toronto and under that spotlight expect him to be even better. And it just never seems to happen. But nonetheless, you've done so many interviews in your career. Did you like doing athletes? Did you find that, you covered some pretty heavy and important stuff. Did you like doing athletes in one-on-one conversations? Yeah. And if so, who do you think would be a good interview on the Maple Leafs this year?
When you watch the Leafs in interviews, it's a struggle. There are guys like Austin, as much as I admire him, and Mitch, same thing. You don't get much out of those interviews, although I'll give Austin credit for the way he handled the whole booing thing the other night. Good for him. I interviewed Pacioretty when he was captain of the Habs when Beliveau died, and he was great. And he tends to kind of think through his answers. He gives you exactly what he's thinking. He doesn't seem to sort of go into the comms approach to the things they should say. I've interviewed Sid quite a few times, right back to his first year in the league. Those are tough. Bobby Orr, I've got to know really well. Bobby's a friend of mine. We have our arguments about politics. We'll leave that aside. But he hates doing interviews. But when his book came out about whenever it was, about 10 years ago, he agreed to do an interview with me because somebody told him, you two will get along, and we did, and we still do. I talk to him all the time, and he was a good interview, but none of them are great interviews. Plus, there's a bit of fanboy in me as well. having grown up, following the Leafs and being a big fan of the Leafs in the late 50s and 60s. So there's still that element to me when I talk to some of these guys. But it's not like you're sitting down expecting, the inner workings of rocket science or brain surgery. You're talking about a hockey game, and the best way to play it. And sometimes trying to get that out of these guys, especially immediately after a game. Either they're in a good mood or they're in a bad mood. So I have some faith in them to be able to navigate those waters. It's got to be tough, especially if you lose a close one or you've made a particularly, bad move in your game, and suddenly the mics are thrust in front of you, and you see the exasperation on some of their faces every once in a while.
You do. And this question comes from the chat, who is giving me grief right now that I don't ask questions from the chat. So here it is. You get a chance to do, hypothetically, a one-on-one with Mitch Marner. You know everything that's going on this season. What kind of questions are you asking?
I think you got to approach where his head's at in terms of his future. I understand that's a tough position to put him in. He's got an agent, and he's got a father who's obviously particularly interested in what's happening with him. And so he's trying to duck that. I understand that, but I don't think you can approach an interview with Mitch any other way at the moment. Obviously you talk to him about the Four Nations thing and how he's feeling about that. And whatever was happening, the first thing that went through my mind the other day when they said he wasn't going to be playing at night and really didn't say anything more than that, I thought, here it is. The moment has arrived. There's a trade. They've got some big blockbuster trade going on.
Wow.
And I tried to think through that one myself. Like, how do I really feel about that? Do we really want to get rid of Mitch Marner, who, as Jay just mentioned a few moments ago, is one of the most exciting players in the league for the things he can do and the way he can set up plays and just the way he can dominate on the ice? Or is this the time? Is this the time where we got to make some huge move? Because as confident as I am in the kind of new Leaf look, I don't take that so far as to say, boy, we're a lock on a second, third, maybe even fourth round in the playoffs. I'm not there yet. I got to see more, and I'm just wondering whether, what are the pieces or piece that we're missing?
Yeah, it is an anomaly, isn't it, with these high-end players that you're so thrilled to have, and yet they fall short every time. It's difficult conversation to have. I think that's why it's so polarizing. But speaking of really good players, this Four Nations Faceoff is coming up. Team Canada, a bit of a dropped ball in the World Juniors, pretty disappointing for everyone in the nation, I think. And time for some redemption here. Are you going to be watching that? And what's your take on what the level of competition is going to be and how hard these guys are going to go during this, ultimately an exhibition?
I think they'll go hard. These guys, I mean, them, Jay. You know what it's like to be in uniform and on the ice, and even a hint of the possibility that you could play with your nation's emblem on your jersey. They're going to be into it. Nobody's going to be sort of dogging it in this series. I worry about just one aspect of our team, and that's the net. Especially when you look at what the Americans have got. But in a series like that, things can change. People who you least expected it, can become heroes. And especially when you're carrying the nation's flag, and others who you expected from can turn up not playing the way that was expected of them. But in terms of the talent on the lines and on the defense, man, there's some great players in this series. I mean, obviously we'd all love it if all the nations were represented, if Russia was there with a team of some of their great players. But listen, it seems almost certain that we're looking at a Canada-US series. Whether it ends up that way in the final game or not, I don't know. But those games, given everything else that's happening between our two countries right now, those are going to be intense. And it's going to be awfully strange to be sitting there watching, Austin on the other side, and some of the other great NHL players who you don't normally think of as American. You just think of them as hockey players, and I think most Canadians it'll come as a shock to them to see some of those who are lined up on the U.S. side, because they're U.S. born players at a time when U.S. born players are really having their moment in the NHL. So am I excited? I am excited. I'm like Jay, and I'm sure you too, Nick. I'm really looking forward to this, and I can't wait for it to get going. Although it would be nice to see the Leafs win one more game before that starts.
With you in attendance, of course. And you're so right on the Four Nations. Like, I won't lie, like, it kind of scares me. I love Austin Matthews, but I think the key for Canada is to run that team out of the building and finish your checks. And it's like, I don't want the check finished on Austin Matthews. I think that's the whole problem with this whole scenario. But you've been referencing it throughout the interview. What have you made of everything over the last couple of weeks with the anthems being booed here in Canada?
I don't like the anthems being booed. I do think that takes it to a new level. I understand the frustration that many Canadians are having, but I mean, look at who you're booing. When you look down on the ice and you're booing the American anthem, how do you think Austin feels? Or, any of the other players? Joseph Woll, he's American, isn't he? And
Yep.
Stolarz American. I mean, how do you feel? How do you think those guys feel? I thought Austin expressed it well by basically just passing on the question. But I think you can make your point by being silent in the American anthem and really going for broke on the Canadian anthem. It'll be interesting to see the contrast between Boston and Montreal. The patriotism surge is up all across this country, and that includes in Quebec in big numbers. So we'll see how that anthem situation plays out there. I mean, listen, we all want to see good hockey. That's what it comes down to. Sure, we want our sides to win, but at the end of the day, we want to be able to say that was a fantastic series. That was great hockey. I'll remember the rest of my life. Remember the New Year's Eve game one year between Russia and the Habs? I think you got to go back in somewhere in the 80s. For that one, but it was a huge thing that for years later, everybody remembered. It wasn't for anything in particular. It wasn't for a Canada Cup or anything. It was just a game, but it was a game that everybody watched and they loved it because it was fantastic hockey. So I think that's what we're hoping for in this series. That we're all moved by the game itself and how it's played. Obviously, we hope our side wins, just as they hope their side wins, whatever country they're cheering for. But we want to see good hockey.
Yeah, and Peter, like, speaking of having the best hockey, I know it's tough when politics cross into sports, but as a man who's been very involved in world events, do you think that Russia should be playing in a tournament like this?
Yeah, I feel pretty strongly about about the whole Ukraine situation. I mean, Russia invaded another country, a sovereign country, and different people, different associations, different sports leagues made decisions based on that. I don't think anybody assumed it was going to last as long as it has. We're coming up on the third anniversary of that invasion. It's probably going to take place the anniversary will take place right in the middle of the Four Nations thing. And it'll be a reminder of why they aren't there. But listen, it would be a better series if they were there. And so I think hopefully this is going to end and they'll be back in, whether it's the Olympics next year or another kind of Four Nations or something similar series in the future.
Looking forward to this tournament. Also, kudos to you for heading out to the game tomorrow. Enjoy it and appreciate your time today, as always.
Thanks, guys. I always love talking to you. It's great. Take care.
You as well.
Thanks a lot, Peter.
Mansbridge. There you go. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.